Okay, so what is sports pro wrestling? If you've read it in the bio of the Urban Elite Pro Wrestling Instagram page, it says that it's sports pro wrestling. I finally, ultimately, hopefully, I've found the right label for the type of training and the type of craft I'm looking to promote. Sports pro wrestling is similar to pro wrestling because it does incorporate heavily the elements of pro wrestling or the grappling aspect of it, but it's extremely different. It's polar opposite to what is presented in in what we frame pro wrestling as in today's day and age. So when we're talking about show business pro wrestling, you have, how do I say this? Like, you have a structure in show business pro wrestling, and I'm trying to explain it both to people that, one, train in pro wrestling and show business pro wrestling, but also two, explaining it to people that are interested in what I'm doing that don't know anything about pro wrestling. So, let's say with show business pro wrestling, you have a structure to every match, right? You have like a beginning, a middle, and end. You have an establishment of the characters, and it's very theatrical. Of a good guy, a bad guy, and then the conflict between the two characters, and then the resolve. So there's a real, it's almost like watching a movie. It's a kind of like a created structure. Whereas with sports pro wrestling, the dynamic is completely different, even though it incorporates the content of being two pro wrestlers, because the story's not the same. The storytelling in pro wrestling, it's similar to that establishing first who's the good guy or the bad guy, right? And it heavily emphasizes that. Sometimes it doesn't have that exact story, but for the most part, there's always someone you don't like and someone you do. Whereas with sports pro wrestling, that's more so, that's like not the emphasis. It's secondary. The primary focus of sports pro wrestling is putting two really athletic competitors, it's like a sport, into a ring or onto the mats or whatever it is, whatever platform it is, to see who truly is the best pro wrestler. And that's the only storyline that you could ever get, or the only dynamic. I suppose that is the story, but that's really all it is. And so the emphasis is on conditioning. The emphasis is not on, it's on sportsmanship, not showmanship, which I think, 99.9% of pro wrestling schools and pro wrestling companies, if not 100%, um, don't really do, what I mean? Because that's not really the business that it fits their model. It's not sports, it's sports entertainment, right? And so it definitely has athletic factors. It definitely has the elements of sports. It's like backwards, right? Like I said, polar opposite. You've got elements of athleticism, but at the end of the day, it's about telling a story, that incorporates a lot of theater. Whereas in this one, it's a sport that incorporates tiny elements from pro wrestling. I think you get it. It's pretty easy to understand one, like as I've explained it. Um, and so I think and I think that's really important. That's really what I'm working on here, is trying to clarify what this is, because it is a new dynamic. And there has been guys in the pro wrestling industry that have tried to present this before, but it hasn't really gotten so much buzz. Like, it's worked for a time, it's spiked, but then it's declined very quickly. And the reason for that, I really think so, because this is all I study. I only study sports pro wrestling and anything associated with sports pro wrestling. Showmanship focused pro wrestling, it doesn't really concern me nor interest me. But when it comes to sports pro wrestling, you have had those, a few guys in every generation that try to ignite it into something. But the fact is that it's if it's sports leaning, it has to emphasize on being catering to a sports audience, not a sports entertainment audience. When something is entertainment heavy or showmanship leaning, then it mainly focuses on a market that's there for entertainment. That's not the market I'm looking for. The market I'm looking for is guys that can see how we are so well conditioned and so well trained to reenact the sport of, and the art form of, actual grappling. So grappling itself. And so that's pretty much it. Like that's really what sports pro wrestling is, and what Urban Elite Pro Wrestling promotes and is working on and experimenting on. Because again, like I said, this dynamic is a very loose one. Guys have come in and tried it with a certain promotion. No ring promotions. If you think of like UWF, World of Sports, all those kind of old school promotions, and even I dare say Pancrase, I think they're more MMA, but at the time, it was really just shoot, right? It was shoot ho. They've got many names for it. But you had a lot of those things that were coming up trying to bring in this dynamic of competitor versus competitor, who's the best. And I still really believe that there's a great market out there for that. It's just not the current. It may not be just the current market that we have right now, because the markets that we have right now in show pro wrestling, and again, when anything got to do with show pro wrestling, I don't know. I'm not an expert on that. I don't obsess over that. I don't seek knowledge. Oh, whoops. I don't really seek knowledge from that, But sports pro wrestling, you know, the market of show pro wrestling is different. The market of show pro wrestling is based on, well, again, like based on entertainment. And so everyone is coming for a story. People's disbelief gets suspended from the characters. Whereas in sports pro wrestling, I guess it is about suspension of disbelief, but it's almost like if you look at like an exhibition, like Bruce Lee was a great demonstrator of a craft that was a work. But at the same time, the things he was doing, because it was parallel to the actual thing, could be done in real life as well, right? And so that's no different to what we're doing here, like what I'm presenting and working on here, and wanting to recruit guys for that really feel drawn towards it. It's similar to that Bruce Lee approach. It's literally taking actual, the legitimate grappling locks, holds, rules, taking great inspiration from that, and then reenacting it so that we can get more people in society, inclined to see the benefits of why they should take up wrestling as, part of their lifestyle and practice, you know. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So hopefully that answers the question, because I've been getting a lot of DMs and they're quite confused about what I'm doing here. Like, am I doing a new promotion? Like show business promotion? No, I'm not doing a show business pro wrestling promotion. That's not why I'm here. It's just not in me to do that. I don't care about that. It's a totally different dynamic where the emphasis of my business is training itself, is conditioning itself, and working on the techniques and forms. But it just so happens that, I tried to change the name from pro wrestling to something else, but I couldn't, because the elements of it is pro wrestling. And it's just like, if you look at it, you'll still see the elements of pro wrestling in it better than anyone else. If I show this to a different grappling art form, they know it's not their sport. Whereas if I show it to pro wrestlers, especially any pro wrestler, they'll see it. They'll see, okay, that is chain, but it's done differently. It's done in a very different way. And it's because I have broke a few rules in regards to how chain wrestling is done in order to cater to a platform that doesn't have ropes, a platform that doesn't have turnbuckles in the way, and it's not on a theatrical stage, but rather, on a wrestling mat. And that's a very different dynamic to play with and experiment and study. And so yeah, like I hope that really clarifies to show pro wrestlers that it's not what you're doing. Okay. And also I hope that it serves to interest individuals that might not be showman type pro wrestlers, that might not feel kind of like how I did. I just ended up after chain wrestling not really feeling like there's any place for me in the show business pro wrestling. I know, like in that kind of realm, just because it doesn't appeal to me. It's just not my interest. I just don't have any interest in it. But I am from the same tree. But hopefully, if this branch is something that maybe you feel might be right for you, if it naturally gravitates towards you, then obviously I'd be more than welcome for you to give it a try, and you can see if it is for you, and if it is, well, happy days. Now, if not, well, then I hope you do find greater opportunities where your place is in this universe, in this world, in this reality. But yeah, and in saying this, like I also want to say that every video will be dedicated to sports pro wrestling from now on, and trying to clarify it, and also whatever I learn, whatever I study, I will put here, so that not only will this evolve in my backyard, but it will be something that can be multiplied all over the world. And that's why social media, YouTube, that's why I'm doing it here. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to focus too much on the local scene, outside of promoting sports pro wrestling and, this dynamic that I'm working on and experimenting with, that, I've tried to present before, but it's very hard to integrate at this time. I don't even know if it belongs on a match card, in all honesty. I don't know. But on its own, as a standalone, yeah, definitely. It's a niche. So yeah, that's it. That's it for today. And like I said, if you are interested in it, just don't hesitate to DM me on Instagram at Urban Elite Pro Wrestling, or you can email me at saulbraddockx@gmail.com, and I will get back to you with more details. So, done.